Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to welcome all of you to today's Gopher Solutions webinar. My name is Tabor Swatsky. I am with Gopher. For those of you who are new to our webinar series, this is a monthly webinar focusing on a variety of physical education subjects and topics. Our past presenters have done a great job of bringing pertinent new ideas and topics to our webinar series, bringing topics, information useful to the field of physical education. Our webinars will almost always occur the third week of the month, and all attendees of today's webinar will receive a certificate of participation, good for educational credit. Today, all attendees will also be registered to win one of two giveaways. We will be giving away our Achieve Physical Education curriculum in the choice of grade level, which is valued at $329. We will also be giving away the other curriculum we carry, Dynamic Physical Education for Elementary Students, which is valued at $280. Our presenter today, Aaron Beatley, is the co-author of Dynamic PE. Both of those curriculums, Achieve and Dynamic PE, are carried by Gopher. Today's webinar is titled Learn the Key Components of a Quality PE Curriculum with Aaron Beatley. And before I introduce Aaron, I did just want to mention that we will have a chance for questions during the presentation. And on the right-hand side of your screen, there is a questions area, and you can type in any question at any time throughout the presentation that you might have as it comes up. And those questions are only visible to me, the moderator, so don't worry if you don't have to worry about the rest of the group seeing your questions. Type in any questions you might have as they come up. We'll get to as many of those as we can at the end of the presentation with Aaron. Today I have the pleasure of introducing our presenter, Aaron Beatley. Aaron holds a PhD from Arizona State University, specializing in physical education and physical activity for youth. He is currently a faculty member in the Department of Kinesiology and Health Promotion at the University of Kentucky. Dr. Beatley has worked with school districts, recreation programs, and youth sports organizations across the country in their efforts to maximize physical activity experiences and promote youth to be physically active for a lifetime. He is the author and co-author of more than 60 research-based and practical articles. In addition, he was the lead author on NASP's Comprehensive School Physical Activity Promotion, a position statement, and serves as the Let's Move Active Schools Physical Activity Leader Training Development Team. Beatley is also a co-author of 5 books promoting physical activity and health in the classroom, Pedometer Power 2nd edition, and as I mentioned, Dynamic Physical Education for Elementary School Children. At this time, I will turn it over to our presenter. Aaron, it's all yours.
All right, thank you, Tabor, and thank you all for joining me and joining us today. I'm going to talk a little bit about something that's near and dear to my heart, and it's one of these subjects that I think we need to focus a little bit more on, and I'll talk a little bit about what I think we really need to focus on towards the end. But we're going to be talking about components of quality physical education, and I'm going to be talking about the process that we go through to develop those components. So we're basically going to be talking about curriculum development, and you can see on the screen there my Twitter and accounts, and if you want to follow me, I share some things every once in a while, and sometimes it's profound, and actually no, it's never profound. But the big picture, and what I want to talk about and start off here is with what is a curriculum. And the first bullet here is I have a map, and on the right you'll see a map, and if you look closely, after I put this on here, it's not the best illustration, but if you look closely on this map, there are 2 red lines that, regardless of where you want to end up, let's say we want to end up down in the left-hand corner of this map. There are 2 ways to get there. Now, the reality is there's a lot of different ways that we can get to that same point. And what the curriculum should provide you is a map. And I'm going to go back to this analogy later on, but a map to get to that point. And that's what we need. We have to have a map. And what also this curriculum has to be, it has to be standards-based, which means it needs to be based on the standards. Unfortunately, we have the outcomes document now from SHAPE that helps tremendously. It has to be systematically developed. You can't just haphazardly say, yeah, I think we'll do jump roping today, and let's see, football sounds good tomorrow, and then maybe when weather gets better, we'll go outside and maybe we'll do some track and field. There needs to be some reason for why you pick those activities and where they're in your curriculum, and a lot needs to go into it more than just haphazardly putting it together. It needs to be, and I'm going to talk a lot about this, based on a guiding philosophy, and then this needs to be a living document. And the living document, I want to go back to the up in the blue up there. It says written. We have to have this stuff documented. So many times in PE, we just kind of, sometimes it's documented, sometimes it's not. And what we call a curriculum is probably not a curriculum. And we just have this, we need to have it written, but we also need to make sure that it's constantly changing. We don't want to be you don't want to have a curriculum that's the same as it was 20 years ago. It should be different, and it should be living and constantly changing. So what exactly, or why do we want a curriculum? We'll get to what it is in a second. But again, a little bit, there's a compass over on the right. It provides us with some direction so we know where we're going, and that we know that our content is taught in an appropriate progression, that we're not doing football in kindergarten when we haven't taught them to throw yet. So we know that from year to year. We know within the beginning of the year, I'm trying to do an activity that is probably not appropriate, and we know with the curriculum that we can say, that's why, because I tried to teach it too early, or I tried to teach it too late. Not to be Debbie Downer, but there's some liability concerns as well. If something happens, God forbid, something happened in your gym, it's nice to have a curriculum that you can say, look, this is what I did, and this is exactly my lesson I was doing, and this is the lesson that's been documented before, et cetera. It just helps with that. And I think it's a necessity for quality PE. It's just hard to say, yep, we have a quality program, when the reality is that we don't really have anything written to show that we have a quality program. And I'll talk a little at the end about the idea that if someone comes and watches us teach, they can see whether it's quality instruction or not, but we want them to be able to see this tangible piece of document that we have that says this is our curriculum. So these are the key components. And I think, if I remember right, I'm on this slide off the Physical Education Curriculum Analysis Tool Training, the PE-CAT that many of you have heard of, and a lot of this information is some of that is from this, and it all fits in together very well. But these are the components of what a quality physical education curriculum is. And again, the overview is it's going to differ from district to district, but it's just going to provide some context and some foundational information for the curriculum, the demographics, the size of the district, the size of the school, those types of things. Then within that, you're going to have some goals, expectations, standards, those types of things. And you'll also have a scope and sequence, which some people will call a yearly plan. Terminology is going to vary a little bit. And then you have your instructional objectives. Again, some will say the national standards are okay. Some will say you have to have your state. Some states will have different standards and objectives than the national. That's going to be a little bit tricky and dicey, but for the most part, most states that I've seen, theirs are very comparable to the national standards, so you're within the realm of if you look at those. And then the content of the instruction, these next two, depends on how you want to rate it. The content of the instruction is basically your lesson plan. Exactly. And again, it's not just, yep, we're doing football today, or yep, we're doing gardening today, or yep, we're doing inline skating. It's kind of in-depth procedures, exactly what someone can look at this and say, I have a pretty good idea of what's going to happen in this lesson. And then based on that same lesson, obviously you would have your assessments. And then teacher resources, anything that you borrowed from that you use to develop this. And that's not just to give credit, that's so you know in the future where you can go from. So why this was a part of the PE-CAT is early on when we did PE-CAT workshops, we would ask attendees to bring their curriculum. And we got a variety. We got everything from a list of activities to notebook paper where things were written. We didn't have this information. We weren't getting lesson plans. We weren't getting assessments. And I'm not one to say you have to assess every lesson, but there has to be some assessments in there. And then it was just we were missing that. So we included this in to really articulate exactly what it is you need. Now, what I'm going to do moving forward, for the most part, is talk about how do you go about getting this stuff? How do you have goals? I don't know what scope. Where do you even start? Where do you start for your content? How do you pick activities? Those types of things. So I'm going to talk a little bit about those and go through this in the steps to curriculum development. I've seen some of this talked about as backwards design. Seems to be the popular term in the last 15 years or so. I believe this process has been around a lot longer, but it's the same idea. I mean, there's no where we start to. You'll see the first 3 steps, and then we'll get the standards and objectives, and I'll talk a little bit about how that's kind of putting the cart before the horse, but we'll get there. So the guiding philosophy, this, like your curriculum, it has to be written. It cannot be in your head. It can't be, well, we think that we need to get kids fit, which is not one I advocate, or, yeah, our PE program, this is what our PE program is about, and it's one sentence. It has to be thoughtful. It has to provide some in-depth concepts of, like the last bullet here, where does it fit in the curriculum? It's an important part of the entire PE curriculum, addresses the whole child, all those types of things. But one of the reasons this is so important is that this is going to guide, this philosophy will guide all of your decisions. When you go to make a decision for your curriculum or your program, you go back to, does it meet our philosophy? If it doesn't, we don't do it. And that's hard decisions sometimes. I've had to make them in my career, but you make those decisions. And I think that's one that when we have this, it's like a business that doesn't have a mission statement, and then they try and make decisions about where they're going to go as a business, and they don't have a target. They don't have anywhere where they're supposedly heading. And this guiding philosophy basically provides you with your destination if you go back to that map analogy. In it, obviously, there's going to be some sort of definition of what physical education is, and then it's some inclusion of a statement. Why is it important for kids? Again, this isn't 25 pages of the importance of physical activity in kids. That's not what this is. But this is just to provide the importance and what are we going to accomplish? What is physical education? And this is something, it's a totally different presentation, but I think this is something that the field, we have a really hard time identifying. If you go and ask 25 PE teachers, what is PE? You'll probably get different answers. If you ask the public, 100 people, and you ask them what PE is, you're probably going to get different answers, and that is troubling. That's tough because we need to have something that we market that is consistent, that this is what physical education is. And I think we're getting there in the field, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But I think the importance of the guiding philosophy will be, that's why it's a first step. It's going to guide everything else that happens. The next piece is a little bit more, I don't know what you want to call it, more theoretical, or it's a bigger picture type idea, but just having a conceptual framework. And this is just a series of statements. I'm going to give you some examples. These will help direct activity selection. I'm going to talk about that. It's part of, it's a kind of a whittling down of your guiding philosophy. So your philosophy is real big. You can't see my hands right now, but I'm having my hands way out. But your guiding philosophy is way out, and then you start getting it a little bit more narrow with your conceptual framework. And then obviously it addresses some of the components of physical education. So let me give you some examples. That's the best way I think to show about conceptual framework. These are some statements. Again, your big picture philosophy is that we're about promoting lifelong physical activity, and you've got all these other statements and things in there. Then within your curriculum framework, it's hard to talk about goals and objectives are appropriate for all children. Curriculum activities are selected that fulfill their potential to help students reach national and local standards. Curriculum helps children develop lifelong physical activity habits and understand basic fitness concepts. So now we're starting, based on our big picture of what our philosophy is, we're starting to narrow it down and say, okay, now based on that, here are some statements of our conceptual framework to help us really target and make some decisions. The next thing, this isn't necessarily a part, you can consider this part anytime during the process of your, it's not necessarily in order for step number 3, but this is your environment. And where are you located? If you live in Maine, then you might do snowshoeing. And if you're not in Maine, if you're in Lexington, Kentucky, you might not do snowshoeing. Or if you're in Huntington Beach, California, you might not, but you might do some swim safety in the ocean, those types of things. That's going to impact what you try and teach and what you try and do. Obviously, your resources, your equipment, whether PTA is helpful and has a budget. If you have a budget of, $150, I just did a project with my undergraduate students, and they had to figure out how much equipment they needed. And They were shocked when their budgets came out anywhere from $6,000 to $9,000, and I said, how much do you think a local PE teacher gets a year? And I said, $250, and their mouths just dropped. And so, but you have to make those considerations. And another assignment that I make students do is they have to do an equipment inventory of our equipment at UK. And why I do that is I tell them, if you are going to develop a curriculum, you have to know what you have access to. And equipment is a big part of what we do. Similarly, facilities. If it rains or if you have book fair in your gym, do you have somewhere to go? How does that impact your curriculum? Your region of the country, I kind of addressed that a little bit. Administrators, are they supportive or not supportive? Are they going to tell you, well, if we kick you out of the gym, you have this little tiny room you get to go to, and you know you're going to get in that little tiny room 5 times a year. That's going to impact your curriculum and what you try to do. Teachers, somewhat a little bit, you can get some feedback from them. The previous PE teacher, if the previous PE teacher was into outdoor adventure education and has developed relationships with schools and the local community, and they're used to coming in, it's something you'll have to consider. And you might want to slowly wean that out. If that's something you're not wanting to do as much of, or boost it up. You just have to consider what was done before you were there. Obviously, laws and mandates. Then another one is your school schedule. This is going to impact what you can do as well. 4-day, 5-day, 6-day rotations. How many days a week? How many days a year are you going to lose your gym to? I mean, every grade level is going to have to use the gym to practice their dance that they do somewhere else, but they need the gym to practice it apparently, and those types of things. And then obviously, if you have 185 kids in U, what you can do is different than if you have 30 kids in U. So the environment's going to be an important piece that you're going to have to consider as you go through this, trying to develop the necessary requirements for a curriculum. Then, so the first 3, those are all kind of, you develop those. And then what we have for content standards and student objectives, you will have state ones, but you're also going to have the national standards. And then if you haven't checked this out, I would encourage you to go look at the grade level outcomes for K through 12 physical education teachers by Shape America. It's a great document. But what I want to caution you is don't let this strangle you. Don't think, well, this document says that they should be able to skip by 3rd grade, so I'm just going to do a whole lesson of skipping. That's not the intent of the document. At least that's my understanding. So I don't want you to say, oh, well, it says they should be able to toss underhand, so I'm going to do a whole lesson on tossing underhand. That's not the intent of the document. So don't feel you have to strangle yourself with have to meet this objective, one objective, and every day. And I can talk more about that later if you have questions about it. But so the content standards and objectives are there for us. This is what we're going to try and do. We're going to try and teach kids X, Y, and Z, and we have X, Y, and Z done for us. And what you will have to do, is kind of addressed to earlier, is not everything. There's not snowshoeing in the national standards, but you can do that and help that as you go through the process and look at these activities. So you have these national standards. Based on these national standards, then you've whittled this all down. You start selecting activities. Again, we started real big with the philosophy, then with the conceptual framework. Now we have our national standards that are all based. It just keeps funneling down. Now we're going to start picking activities. And we have to first, when we start picking activities that are based on these standards, you have to understand kids. And I put children here, probably should have put students, because this is a K through 12 thing. This isn't just for elementary. But the process of selecting activities is based on your guiding philosophy and your conceptual framework. And you consider the environment. They obviously have to be aligned with national standards and objectives. That's, most things are. When you select these activities, in the back of your mind, you need to be thinking, how am I going to evaluate that? How am I going to show that I'm teaching students this? And then it needs to be children-centered. You're not going to hear me say, I wonder what teachers like to teach, because I don't really care what teachers like to teach. I care what kids need. And we have to be child-centered or student-centered when we pick these activities, which goes back to the first bullet, that we have to understand what kids are all about and what kids, to understand them, where they are, why do we do interval training, those types of things. So we start to select the activities. And when we have this big, you select every activity you can think of, and you throw them all into a pot. And then you're going to, or a sift, I guess is a better analogy, since I'm going to use that here in a second. So you have this sift. And you take the sift, and you have an activity, and you put it through the sift of all of these questions I have here. Is the activity consistent with standards? If it is, then that makes the cut and it goes to the next level. Is the activity activity-based? I know that sounds like a silly sentence, but when you do this, are kids going to get maximized activity? Not I don't care if it's 100% that, but are they going to be active, or is this checkers? Well, if it's checkers, it's gone. If it's consistent with the standards and it's activity-based, then it keeps going down through this whole process. And this is my, I guess, weak attempt at a visual. That's supposed to be a SIF there, and all these different balls represent activities that you pick. So the first activity, well, some of them get through and some of them get thrown out, and the SIF catches those activities that aren't consistent. Then the next one, the SIF catches activities that they're consistent with standards, but they're not activity-based. Then the next one is they're inclusive of all students. It's developmentally appropriate. The activity meets the needs, urges, and interests of students. I mean, there's just et cetera. You could go on and on and on. I just didn't have the space to put more than 3 SIFs. But the idea is we're starting to whittle this down even further to the activities that meet the standards and meet our philosophy. Because remember, all these activities consistent with standards, the activities activity-based, all that's based on the conceptual framework. And that conceptual framework is based on your guiding philosophy. So we're continuing to funnel this stuff down to now, when we're done with this, now we have activities that are consistent with our philosophy that we know we can teach, that are consistent with national standards, that are activity-based, et cetera. So we have a group of activities to do this. Then comes the next big step, and this is the one that, at least when I was starting to teach, and I'll share that story a little later, but it was a tough process. How in the heck do you organize this? I mean, I planned this activity and then it rained, and that activity built on another activity, and then I taught in Dallas, Texas, so it was hot and couldn't go outside and all these kinds of things. Excuse me. So first of all, consider developmental levels. Then organize your activities easy to difficult. Then you have to consider your scope and sequence and depth and breadth of where you want to go with this. How many, you meet with a department. We had 3 teachers, and we would meet to say, okay, we want to try and do these locomotor movements early in the year because we wanted them to be the foundation. So if we do that early, then what we do later, and if we teach this in the 2nd grade, what are we going to teach the 4th grade? Because this isn't about doing the same lesson over and over and over. We're not doing throwing with kindergarten the same way we do throwing with 8th grade. It just doesn't. We need to figure that out. And you have to work together. If you need help with that, there are places you can go get curricula. I know that Tabor mentioned some that are out there that you're going to be able to win today, and they're done for you, and I'll talk about that. Ordering it within the year, what are you going to do first, second, third? Oftentimes, most teachers say, well, we'll do the outside activities in the spring, or in the fall and the spring. Well, when I was at Arizona State, you did the outside activities in the winter. And then because in August and September, you couldn't go outside because of the heat, and you couldn't go outside in April and May because of the heat. So you start to organize these, and you have a yearly plan, and then you develop your lesson plans. And those lesson plans, again, I can't emphasize this enough. This includes your assessments. And I think that's a key part of these lesson plans, and to have that as a component. So this step, we've organized, we have all the activities, and now we've organized them. And we're going to start teaching it, and we're going to keep notes. This is one of the best things I was told to do when I started teaching. All of my lesson plans, it's reflecting. I think it's probably one of the more important things that especially new teachers, but all teachers do, is keep notes. What worked, what didn't work, why, you tried a game of crows and cranes and it didn't work, but you tried it with the next class and it did. Why was that? And keep track of those types of things. Or you try an activity that's just a complete bust. Document it. Because guess what? If you don't document it, if you're like me, I learned this when I was teaching, you're going to teach the same lesson next year and think, man, that wasn't any good this year either. And the reason it wasn't any good is for the same reasons. And it could be, and this reflection process also relates to this to student assessment. I mean, say you're doing long rope and half the kids can't jump. Well, if half the kids can't jump and the issue is probably in the mirror. You need to look at that and say, what am I teaching? Not that you throw out long rope, but you figure out what did I do differently, or how does it work with this class and not this class? But you're not going to get that just trying to remember it. So I encourage you to make changes as you go. When I was teaching, this is how old I am. I actually had a little tiny cassette recorder that I put in a fanny pack, and some of you are getting a visual of a fanny pack. Yeah, it looked that bad. But I recorded things like I recorded behavior issues. I recorded lesson things that didn't work. I recorded that, this attendance or doing attendance necessarily didn't work, or this group can't handle getting in groups of 4. Wait till 2nd grade, those types of things. And it's all things that we went back and I kept notes, and we changed our curriculum year to year based on this. The last thing, second to last thing I'll tell you is that I think this was a career changer. It was a career changer for me. And if you've never done it, I don't care if you've been teaching for 50 years and you've never done it, do this. Video yourself. It will change your career. And it'll change your career. Things like, I never forget, I have a video of me. I can't find it now. I wish I could to show my students. Hands in pockets, didn't smile the whole lesson. And it's like, wow, act like you enjoy your job. You have the best job in the world. And I didn't. And very powerful for me. And the reason I say it related to curriculum is you can see things that you don't necessarily see when you're teaching. Like, wow, I didn't even notice that half the kids aren't doing exactly what I asked them to do, or those types of things. So the power of video is it's incredible, and it will help you tremendously to make changes in teaching, but also changes in your curriculum. And here's the other thing that's relatively new, and I'll talk about consulting with teachers is not new, but so many times in PE, it's tough to really get feedback that matters. I remember when I was teaching, the principal came and watched me teach, and I used all red playground balls. We had tons of equipment, and I had lots of different colors. And most of you are thinking, yeah, exactly. You know why I use red playground balls? Because they fought over the yellow playground balls and the purple, and it slowed everything down because I had to break up fights, and they couldn't just go get a ball. And so I get some feedback from her, but for the most part, it's really hard to get feedback from another PE teacher that knows what you're going through and has been there. That's where social media comes in. I think it's, they call it PLNs, professional learning networks, or professional learning communities, or whatever the term is in your district. They use it this week, and they change it next week. But the reason I put these question marks, and this is one of my caveats on social media, is we have to be careful because there is no refereeing and there's no filter on social media. I can put a lesson, a relay lesson of one kid and 30 kids in a line running back and forth, getting numbers, and then they have to make the biggest number, and I'm integrating math and physical education, and I can get lots of likes on it, but it's still an awful activity. And so that's the thing you have to be careful on social media is when you look at something and you ask activities and things like that from people, and you see them, go back to your philosophy, your conceptual framework, all of that stuff. Does it fit? Does it go through your SIP? The big one that everybody has out there is that hippo game. It's a fun game. I don't have any issues with it at all, but where does it fit? And you have to decide that. Am I doing cooperation? I've seen teachers teach in cooperation, yet they never talk about communication. They never talk about working together. They never talk about listening. None of that. So is it just for kicks and giggles, or are we doing this for a real reason? And I think that's the key on social media, or not even social media. If you go to a conference and see an activity, wow, that looks like a fun activity, but where does it fit with what you're doing? Because it has to. You can't just come back and say, wow, that was a great activity using those noodles, if it doesn't fit with what your philosophy or your conceptual framework, and keep going back to that. And if it fits in there, then use it. If it doesn't, don't use it. And that's one we get enthralled with, oh, that's a great activity. That was a funny presenter, but the activity doesn't fit anywhere. We have to consider where that goes. So kind of wrapping up that piece of it, and I'm going to get to some other comments here, and then we'll open up for questions. The curricula need to be written. It needs to be thoughtful and appropriate and evolving. And I think I've touched on all these, that we have to document this. This is where the PE-CAT comes in. If you've never done it, I encourage you to look into it. It's online now. They don't have it down to 5 standards yet, but in essence, the standards haven't changed much. So the written curriculum, if you're going to do the PE-CAT, again, I have to have it written. You can't just, one person can't have it in their head. It has to be a team. And it has to be, I encourage you, if you were heavily involved in writing it, I encourage you to get somebody else to do it, because that's your baby. You're not going to say it's awful. You're not going to say, wow, that's really bad. I didn't do that. And that's okay. I mean, we look at ours all the time and say, wow, we need to change this, and what can we do? The whole thoughtful and appropriate, again, that's one I think we need to really consider our philosophy. And for example, one of the things I talk about, people think I'm nuts, but that's okay, is where's gardening in PE? If we say that we're about promoting lifelong physical activity, providing kids with the skills, knowledge, and attitude to be active for a lifetime, and gardening is in the top 5 activity for adults, why is it not in PE? And frankly, it's a bit uncomfortable for me to say that, because I don't know anything about gardening. But I know places, I know there's a school in Trenton, New Jersey, I believe, that's doing some gardening, and some other schools that are doing gardening. And I think that's one area that we can really look into and really look at what we're doing and look at our curriculum. And if your curriculum, and this is where we get into so many issues in PE, is we'll say, yep, we're about promoting life lifelong physical activity. And then you look at the curriculum and it's 95% team sports. Well, that's an issue because team sports aren't what adults do to be active. And so we have to consider those types of things. I'm not saying team sports should not be in PE. I'm not saying there's not concepts you can teach. But this relates to the whole idea of evolving. And, 20 years ago, parkour would never have been thought to be in PE. If you're not familiar with it, it's Parkour. Just YouTube it. There's lots of, it's kind of the extreme thing where people like jump over buildings and things. Obviously, we're not jumping over buildings in PE, but it's the idea of fitness and challenge courses and those types of things. But that's where we're evolving. I mean, inline skating and all these things that are trendy, we just have to be careful not to be too trendy and jump on too many bandwagons. But I think we have to be evolving as a field in physical education. So how do you apply all this mumbo jumbo, all these steps and all this kind of stuff? My advice to you, having been on this boat when I was teaching, is start with an existing one. Don't try and create it from scratch. Been there, done that, and I don't advise it at all. I think there's just so much to do it right. I mean, all those steps, can you imagine how long that would take you? You're going to have to think about how long it would take you to research to find every activity that's possible. Not just activities that you do, that you've done in your life, but activities that, orienteering and, like I said, parkour and all these other activities. So use an existing curriculum and then teach it and reflect and think about it. What's working? What goes totally against what you stand for, what you think PE should be. And then once you say, this is what PE should be, challenge yourself to keep looking. What is it? I don't think you have the answers. That's one of the good things about social media. We'll continue to challenge, especially get involved with some international folks. There's a little different perspective. Doesn't mean that you have to, change everything, but I think that will help you as you teach and reflect and think and ask questions and get in conversations. And then over time, you're going to make it your own. I've worked with teachers here in Lexington that use our curriculum, but my advice to them is use it for the first few years, but then change it as you go. You're going to see another activity, you're going to go to a conference, you're going to try something over and over and you just can't make it work. Your time restraints are different, those types of things. Change it, make it your own. That's what makes it so important and such a great process is when you can take a curriculum and make it your own. And I encourage you, try various instructional and curriculum models. Try cooperation, try tasks, try stations, try letting kids have more control. If you look at Moss's stuff with going from direct style all the way down to, try all those. Try curriculum models. We work with some middle school teachers that some of their team sport units, they use sport ed, and then they use adventure ed, and they use multi-activity model. They use a variety of curriculum models, and they keep tweaking it, and they try basketball with team sport ed, and they don't like it, so then they try TGFU with something, and constantly mixing and matching. Because if you don't, that's, again, you're going to be teaching 20 years, and you're going to have 1 year of experience 20 times. Constantly change it. Every time I've ever talked to a good quality teacher and I ask them, how do you do this? They always say, I tried this way, and I kind of like that, but I started this, and it morphed over into this, and I went back to this, and now I'm going to try this, but I'd really like to get back to this. It's always what they say. And if you don't change it often, that's when you're going to get stale, and you're going to end up sitting in a chair like my daughter's physical education teacher. He has since retired, but it was a substitute the other day. She's only in second grade. She goes, he sat down the whole time. Can you believe that? And that's what he does. There's pictures in the yearbook of him sitting down. That's how he taught. And he was beat down. And I would assume he's beat down. I don't know why else he would just sit all day. But so we don't want that. We want you to change it often and revisit at least one part of this process yearly. Look back. Has my philosophy changed at all? I'll be perfectly honest. When I first got into this field, I was going to get every kid fit. That was my goal. And some of you have probably read some of my work. My philosophy's changed dramatically. Fitness is not very high on my list anymore. So I changed my philosophy. And that changed. But if you change your philosophy, your conceptual framework, everything trickles down. Nothing wrong with that. That's a good thing when you start looking at those types of things. Change your lesson plans often. Obviously, there's a little bit of a theme here. Change. And add new activities. But as I said earlier, if they make it through your SIS, don't just take new activity, hungry hippo. Wow, that looks fun. Let's put it in today. Well, how does it fit in with anything you were doing today? You have to hold that integrity of what you're trying to do. All right, so here's my closing shots, and then I see we have some questions. I don't know if there's more that I'm not seeing, but basically what you're doing with your curriculum is you're doing drills, skills, activities, those types of things, and they're a dime a dozen. And what I don't want you to forget is that teachers who positively impact the lives of their kids are not a dime a dozen. So for the most part, if you're a good teacher, you're probably going to have a good curriculum. But I don't want you to lose sight of that. And my point was this: I just went out and saw a student teacher a couple of days ago, and he had some behavior issues that should have been addressed, and they didn't. They weren't addressed. And after I talked to him at the end, he said, "I had to get through my lesson." And I said, "Well," I said, "you know, from the first class you ever had from me, I told you that the most important thing you do is make these kids better human beings. And you're worried that you're not going to get all your rolling activities in when you have kids over here that need to learn what appropriate behavior is." So my point with that is that the activities are great, and there's lots of places out there to get activities. It's the quality instruction that we need to really start focusing on and continue to focus on, because if you have a quality curriculum, it's kind of like having a very, very good menu or recipe, but you can't cook. It's just not going to be the same. You have to worry about your cooking first. And the second bullet here, the curriculum doesn't make the program, the teacher does. You do. It's not a binder. You know, you're going to win. Two people are going to win books. That's not going to make you a good teacher. The curriculum that you teach is great, and they're great curriculum, but the teacher has to be the one that really impacts that and really starts focusing it. So don't lose sight of just because you have a great binder that everybody says is the greatest binder ever. The instruction has to be there as well. So I just don't want to lose sight of that. So in conclusion, that we all, as I said earlier, we saw on that map, we all have one destination. We know that we're promoting lifelong physical activity. We're trying to provide students with the skills, knowledge, and attitude to be active for the rest of their lives. That's in general. Some of you may disagree. You're wrong. I'm just kidding. But some of you may disagree. But that's our. But we have that. We're getting there. The field. We're starting to get one destination. There's lots of routes we can go about. There's TGFU. There's tons of. There's Sport Ed. There's lots of different routes to get there. But the route has to be based. The route that you choose to take your students on has to be based on your philosophy, and your philosophy has to be based on what's best for kids. Look around, ask around. There are tons of people out there that are worried about when your focus should be. I was just in a meeting with a bunch of administrators the other day, and they said, "Well, what's your motivation for working with these school districts?" And my first reaction was, "This is what is good for kids." And it's not about me, it's not about my curriculum, it's not about that. It's about what's good for kids. And when we lose sight of that and worry about the standards and worry about other things, that's when we get in trouble. And the standards should relate to what is best for kids. And keep an eye on your destination. I don't know how many of you watched I think it's called Man vs. Wild. I love that Bear Grylls. He's crazy. He eats like crazy stuff. But I watched the show the other night, and he said, "I just have to keep my eye on the sun because I know I want to head west." And he said, "If I start turning around and get lost in it was in a bunch of trees, that's when we lose perspective." So don't get turned around. Don't start worrying about all these other activities and these standards and where your assessments and all these kinds of things, and lose sight of what your route, where your destination is, and that's promoting lifetime activity. And what you do should be designed to do that. And then you can alter your route as needed. I mean, if all of a sudden it comes down to, wow, I have to go outside all the time, I'll make some changes. I'll make a little bit different route, but I still have the same destination and same destination where I'm heading to with the kids. So, having said that, I will turn it over to Tabor. I think I heard you click back on.
Yes.
And if there are any questions.
Just a reminder, everybody, if you have questions, go ahead, ask them, type them in that right-hand side of your screen. We have a few questions queued up here that we'll get to. Also, the webinar is recorded. It'll be emailed out to you with your certificate of participation. This is a great topic today to take to your PE department. So if you have PE meetings throughout the school or throughout the district, a great place to start when looking at the curriculum that you have and changes you want to make to it and how you want to structure it. So a lot of our webinars are appropriate for that type of a thing. If you have a monthly or whenever type of meeting with your PE staff, we've archived all of these webinars, and they're a great way just to get some new ideas, get some ideas flowing within your PE staff. So that being said, let's start off with a question from one of our attendees about how their classes are structured. So this particular teacher, the district operates on a 6-day cycle, each class once in the cycle. So basically what the question's getting at is it ends up being about 30 classes plus or minus in an entire school year. And the question is, what's your philosophy or approach from an elementary PE standpoint, how to approach that from a programming and curriculum standpoint, considering that we're dealing with 30 class periods? I know a lot of curriculums have a lot more detail to it and, would obviously go over the course of a lot more than 30 classes. So, Aaron, kind of how would you start from a philosophical standpoint and looking at a curriculum for that structure?
Yeah, it's a really good question. The first thing is just when we go back to how you organize your activities, just know that you only have 30. And the reality is, I'm guessing that plus and minus, I can see the question now. The minus is probably going to be more like it, because if you say you get 36 weeks, if you get 30, you're probably lucky. But I think you go with what you're given. You can advocate for more, but you're going to have to make choices, and there are some things you're just not going to do. And you might be some things you do, and you say, okay, I'm going to do this in second grade, but I'm not going to do it in third. It's not an easy situation to be in, but I would make choices. I would lay it out. Say, I have 30 days. What am I going to do in this half hour, this half hour, this half hour? The idea of only having them, I don't know, I didn't say how long you have them for, but I would really focus on, again, how you organize things. It goes back to being efficient within your lessons, which is management, which is a totally different ballgame. We're having but anyway, you want to focus on the management piece as well, since you're going to be limited in your time. But just know that you have 30 days. And so, you know what, you might not be able to do as many throwing lessons. It's not right. I don't like it, but you might not be able as much throwing with kindergarten as you do first grade or second grade. Or we divide ours up by K1, 2. So you might have to say, you know what, K1, 2 is not going to get as much jump rope, but we're going to hit that hard in 3, 4, 5 because that's what we think is important. You just have to make those decisions. Not an easy situation to be in, but it's one that's not uncommon as well.
Right. You'd mentioned social media is a great way to consult with other teachers, and one of the questions revolves on what type of social media areas do you go to, Aaron? Where do you look for some of those things?
Good. I use two. I use Twitter, and as opposed to trying to get it everywhere, if you get on Twitter, and then if you follow me, you can see the people I follow. And then I also use Voxer, Voxer, which is a great way. If you do not ever use Voxer, go to voxerpe.com, and they will walk you through how to use it. Voxer is basically like Twitter, except for you can speak, and you say it, and you message back and forth. It's kind of like a walkie-talkie back and forth, and you can get in groups, and there's all kinds of groups, and lots of helpful people. A guy named Justin Schleider and Mike Graham are two guys to look for. They're unbelievably helpful, and if there's some I forget, I know Jorge Rodriguez is into it as well. But I think if you get into Twitter and Voxer, those are two great ways to connect with other PE teachers.
Great, thanks. Question about fitness testing and assessments around fitness testing. Wondering, a little bit about what to assess: physical, skill, task assessment. How do you do it, written or self-reflection? And then kind of a broader question, should those assessments be consistent across the district in the physical education classes?
That's a big question. It's a good.
Yeah, it is.
Whatever you do with assessment, the bottom line is it needs to be efficient. You can't have kids sitting for 10 minutes writing at the end of PE lesson. I know people ask for it, and some of you are saying, "No, I disagree with him because your district makes you." That's okay. I mean, but that shouldn't be that way. You need to use, and we teach our students to use things like checklists, which are very efficient. You can just watch a class and you check off what they aren't doing. I know the state of Ohio has a lot of checklists and things that I think you can access. If I'm speaking out of turn, I apologize, Ohio. But those are the types of checklists, peer assessments, program practice sheets. There's a ton of those. If you email me, I can give you some of these assessments. We have them that we've developed and use in a training that we do. But the key is to be efficient. Now, should it be consistent across district? I don't think that, because I think the assessments, for example, if you're doing physical skills, I'm a favor of using checklists, and I evaluate students based on the cues that I give. So, for example, if I use T, elbow, step, and throw for throwing, then that's the cues I assess them on. But you might not use T, elbow, step, throw. You might use I, X, elbow, follow through, or twist and no step, or those types of things. So I don't know that the district-wide should be exactly the same, but I think the concepts related to fitness self-assessment, in my mind, is the only way to go. Let them assess themselves. Is it accurate? No, but it's not accurate when you do it either. So that's out the window. Let them know. And that, I think, should be district-wide. I think that, and again, that's probably a totally different presentation. But
Yeah.
I think the key is to be efficient with your assessments and assess them on their cues. Most kids can make a tee, bend their elbow, step and throw. They might not all be able to throw and hit a target, but they can experience success. And again, that's a different presentation on success, but I think that's the key to assessments. I don't know if I answered the question very well, but.
No, and I might have this wrong, but did you do a webinar for us on assessment?
And
if you can't remember, that's all right.
I think I did. Yes, I did. I believe I did. I think I did, and there might be somebody did a blog too, but I don't hold me to that.
Yeah, so check out the archived webinars. There might be one out there as far as assessment. Question about a teacher who's currently teaching a sports-based curriculum. How would they go about integrating non-sports? Looks like it's grades 6 through 8.
I think if I understand the question right, I would just cut some of the sports I do, and I would include things like orienteering and rhythms and frisbee golf and those types of, look at the activities that the adults in your area do for activity and teach it. We know data just saw 55% of adults live in the same state they were born in, and that's a U.S. stat. If you're listening to some other countries, you might move more, but so we just find out what they do. Walking, I mean, how many of us have a walking and jogging lesson, and talk about pacing and those types of things. And so I guess just decrease the amount of sports and increase the I guess non-sports. I mean, again, I think tennis and badminton, those types of things have potential for lifelong activity. And again, there are books out there that have great ideas for different types of curriculum. I'm drawing a blank now. I mean, again, badminton and walking and jogging and bicycling and swimming and those types of things, if you have access to that.
Good. A question about where a teacher can find curriculum resources to borrow from, and I think what they're getting at is any experience, Aaron, that you've had in social media or other places where teachers or schools or districts share kind of the curriculum that they've developed, as opposed to, looking at a commercially produced curriculum, where they might be in a neighboring district or even the same state, or, be dealing with some of the similar things that you've talked about, how, with weather and whatever. So anything you've run across where there's teachers or places where they're sharing kind of the curriculum framework that they're doing within their district or school?
It's all over the place on Twitter and Voxer. More Twitter, at least. Voxer has it as well. Twitter is easier to see. Voxer, sometimes I get caught up and I can't listen to all the messages I need to listen to. But yeah, it's all over the. Most people, I don't know many that would say, no, I'm not sharing what I do. Frankly, that's why most people get on Twitter, is they want to share. They want to show people what they're doing, and they want to hear other people's ideas. So again, I can't emphasize Twitter enough. Again, I talked about the caution you need to have, but I think that would be the best way. Again, I'm not begging for people to follow me, but if you follow me, then you can look at the people I follow. Maybe you can just look at the people I follow without following me. But you can see there's just so many of them. There's like 25 or 30. There's a list going around of the people you should follow. So you'll find tons of information. It takes a while to get up and running with Twitter, but I encourage you to look into it.
Good. All right, so one of the questions was where to find the Gopher webinar recordings. Don't search Gopher Solutions. You'll find a bunch of stuff out there on how to kill gophers. But if you search Gopher Solutions, that's all right, Gopher Solutions webinar, you should see Gopher webinar recordings. And it's at gophersport.com/info/webinars-recordings. But the easier way to do it is just search Gopher Solutions webinar. Next question is about a school where they have an A, B, C, and a D week. So the teacher sees one set of kids on, let's see, one set all week, and then I won't see them again for another 4 weeks. How can I create a curriculum without the kids forgetting what they did for 4 weeks ago? Okay, so I think, the big question here is with a schedule where you don't see the kids very often, which, this example or others, what are your suggestions to, make sure that you kind of pick up where you left off and not have to rebuild?
Yeah, I've always thought that situation, that's a tough one, because basically what you have to do every 4 weeks is you have to reestablish your management. So you have to spend at least half of your first day reminding them what freeze means, reminding them where to go. When you say go to the red line, I mean, I know that sounds, but so I feel the pain. I've been involved with that before. It's tough. I mean, it's there are teachers, it's not much easier when you have a 6-day rotation, because if you have PE on Friday, you don't have PE until 2 Mondays. So, it's like, why, they're calling you teacher again instead of Mr. Beatley. I mean, they don't know who you are. So, it's tough. I mean, it's really hard. And I think one of the things to make an idea would be maybe have your instant activity, ASAP, intro, whatever you call it, related to your last lesson. So if you did the Cotton Eye Joe as a part of your lesson last time, maybe have your intro, they walk and freeze a few times, and you turn on the Cotton Eye Joe, and again, just to jog that and bring that up every so often. That's probably the best way to include it in your curriculum, and then make sure, like if you're doing throwing, you do throwing, maybe not do it the next time, but then have an intro as throwing, so they, just to see, it's almost like the anticipatory set philosophy, where your intro will be a kind of a review of what you did last time and establish some of the management protocol, that kind of thing, and get that out of the way. That, again, that's the only approach I've ever given anyone that they've tried. I think the success is up and down, but at least that's the best way to try and jog their memory about what you taught.
Sure. Great. Well, thanks so much, Aaron. And before I announce the winners of the what we're giving away from a curriculum standpoint, I wanted to just remind everybody that you will receive an email with a link to the recorded webinar. That should also take you to the archived ones. You will get your certificate of participation. And be sure to keep an eye out for upcoming emails on next month's webinar topic and be able to register for that. The winner of the Achieve curriculum is Fernando Hernandez. He is the PE department chair at Loyola High School of Los Angeles. And Fernando, you will be contacted by somebody from Gopher to choose which grade level you would like your curriculum to be. And then our second winner of the Dynamic Physical Education Elementary Curriculum, the textbook and the lesson plans, which Aaron is co-author on, is Debbie O'Connell from Sioux Hill Elementary School in Michigan. So thank you so much, Aaron. Thank you all for joining us, and we hope to see you again at another Gopher Solutions webinar. Have a great afternoon.